Good morning, everyone, and welcome to all members for this first ever virtual annual general meeting of the RYA. Thank you for joining us today. The notice convening this meeting was printed on page 4 of the annual report and accounts for the year ended 31st March 2020 and can be taken as read. I would now like to formally call the meeting to order and invite Dave Strain, RYA Finance Director and Company Secretary, to brief attendees on the procedure. Dave.
Thank you, Chris. We will quickly get on to the agenda item, approving the accounts. So if there are any questions specifically arising from the financial statements, please submit these as soon as possible. All questions can be submitted via the chat function shown on your screens or by emailing agm@rya.org.uk. This is your association and your AGM, and the virtual AGM will be a new experience for many of us. I'd like to thank our members for their feedback ahead of this AGM and for their advance voting. Members were able to vote from the 29th of October to the 19th of November. All votes have been counted by UK Engage, our independent verifiers. The Chair will announce the results of the voting for each motion as the AGM proceeds, and the final results, as signed by UK Engage, will be available afterwards on the RYA website. As we move through the resolutions, attendees can submit questions through the chat function on their screens, again, or by emailing agm@rya.org.uk.
Thank you, Dave. That's very clear. Our President, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, is unable to be with us in person today, but has recorded a message for RYA members to be played as the AGM is broadcast, although only a short excerpt will remain in the recorded version. Tom, could you please play the President's message now?
This year has yet again highlighted the invaluable and essential contribution made by volunteers across all areas of society. The boating community is fortunate in having a great many dedicated and knowledgeable volunteers. Their work ensures that this sport thrives. Many of you participating online today will be amongst that number, and I would like to thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the 2019 AGM, which was circulated in the spring 2020 edition of the RYA magazine. 99.5% of members voted to approve the minutes, with 2,844 votes for, 14 votes against, and 268 abstentions. I'm therefore happy to confirm that the membership considers them to be a true record, and the official copy will be sent to the President for signature. The second item on the agenda is my formal report as Chair of the Board, before I ask Dave Strain to read the report of the Auditor. As Chair of your association, I'm very pleased to report on another successful year for the RYA, albeit one that concluded just as significant COVID-19 restrictions were introduced in the UK. The many achievements of the RYA and our members during the past year are well explained in the strategic report, and Sarah will shortly talk about our financial results. But this is my opportunity to recognise and thank the many people who have contributed to those achievements. The success of the RYA is enabled by our many volunteers at all levels across our sport. I would like to recognise the efforts of those members working on our regional and policy forming committees in the home countries and my fellow non-executive directors on the RYA board. I should also express our thanks and appreciation to both UK Sport and Sport England for their support. I would also like particularly to thank all RYA staff across the UK for their hard work. They have made great efforts in all areas, including developing training, lobbying, advising on key issues, organising very successful events ashore and afloat, supporting our members and athletes, and reinforcing our objective to increase boating safety throughout the UK. I should of course remind you that this report covers the financial year 2019 to 2020, which ended on 31st March, and therefore was only slightly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is important to note that the economic and social consequences of the COVID crisis have had a major effect on the boating community and the operations of the RYA, and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. The crisis has posed major challenges for recreational and competitive boating and for the RYA as its national governing body. But together, we have risen to the challenge. Our e-sailing activity, our sailing from home, our webinars have all been hugely popular, and we've witnessed phenomenal innovation at boating clubs throughout the country. We must recognise, however, that there will be financial pressures on many of our individual and affiliate members in the new normal. We all have to work hard to ensure participation and membership is maintained and increased. We must all do our bit for our activity and sport to help our communities emerge from the crisis and help all those who have been affected, either physically, mentally, or economically, to be able to participate and benefit from the well-being, friendship and enjoyment that boating brings. And in looking ahead, I would like to highlight the continued efforts that the board and staff will all be making to engage with our members and assist them. We will work better to understand how our volunteers, on whom our sport depends, can be assisted and encouraged in their efforts to welcome participants of all backgrounds, ages and abilities into boating. Thank you all for your continued loyal support. Dave, please could you now read the report of the auditor?
Certainly. The opinion of our auditors, Hayes McIntyre LLP, was recorded in the annual report as follows. We have audited the financial statements of the Royal Yachting Association for the year ended 31st of March 2020, which comprised the Statement of Comprehensive Income, the Statement of Financial Position, the Statement of Cash Flows, the Statement of Changes in Reserves and the related notes. The financial reporting framework that has been applied in their preparation is applicable law and United Kingdom accounting standards, United Kingdom Generally Accepted Accounting Practice, including FRS 102, the financial reporting standard applicable in the UK and Republic of Ireland, otherwise known as UK GAAP. In our opinion, the financial statements give a true and fair view of the company's affairs as at 31st of March 2020 and of its deficit for the year then ended. They have been properly prepared in accordance with United Kingdom Generally Accepted Accounting Practice and have been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Companies Act 2006. The full report to the members, signed by David Cox, the Senior Statutory Auditor for and on behalf of Hayes McIntyre LLP, was signed on June the 24th, 2020.
Excellent. Now I shall call on our Chief Executive, Sarah Tressida, to report on the annual accounts for the year ended 31st March 2020. Sarah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Chris has already mentioned, it's difficult to think about the 1920 year in isolation whilst ignoring the months that have followed. Thankfully, we once again ended the year in a very strong financial position. Overall, our income was similar to the prior year at a little over 21 million, some 65% of which was generated from non-grant sources, including training and subscriptions. Whilst we remain extremely grateful for UK Sport and Sport England's investment, we strive not to be overly reliant on them, although independent income generation has proved deeply challenging since March. We had anticipated a break-even position before our pension adjustment, and we achieved that. managing also to bring forward a total of £400,000 relating to our major investment in digital transformation this year. Staff numbers and costs increased slightly during the year as a number of vacant posts were filled and a small number of new roles created. Debtors and stock holdings continued to fall, and we ended the year with almost 4.5 million in cash, and total members' funds remained above 8 million, with usable reserves at the higher end of our reserves policy, which has provided a solid foundation for us to be able to respond to the financial challenges that we faced and continue to face as a result of the pandemic. Having seen the final salary pension scheme deficit reduce over the previous 2 years, we were perhaps unfortunate to have scheduled our triennial review for April 2020. Unsurprisingly, given the market turmoil at the end of the year, the deficit was deemed to have increased, and members will see a new £200,000 charge on our income statement. Pleasingly, and despite the difficult underlying conditions since April the 1st, we've been able to close off the triennial review process and agree a new recovery plan with our trustees and the actuary. This has now been submitted to the pension regulator. Working in partnership has never been more critical in enabling us to achieve our goals, and we are very pleased to have received confirmation that both UK Sport and Sport England grant funding will be extended to support our activity through to the end of March 2022. This encompasses the postponed Tokyo Olympic Games, where the British sailing team were the only nation to have qualified so far in all disciplines. We're awaiting a final decision for Paris 2024 investment from UK Sport, while Sport England are currently consulting on their future strategy. Early in the year, our Green Blue project were proud to receive the World Sailing 11th Hour Racing Sustainability Award in recognition of high impact and highly replicable sustainability initiatives. Sustainability continues to be an important theme for the RYA and will be a major focus in the coming years, alongside the other key priorities identified by the board as the framework for our transitional strategy for the year through to March 22. The three strands of activity start with supporting the sport via initiatives to help clubs, members and training centres recover from COVID-19, where and if possible to recover or start to recover the RYA's financial position, in particular through maintaining the cost efficiencies that we've made this year. And thirdly, to maintain momentum in those key long-term trends of diversity, sustainability and digital transformation. This transitional plan will bridge the gap between the end of our current strategic plan and the consultation, design and implementation of a now new 3-year plan, which we hope you will all participate in designing. In the period since March, the pandemic has had a huge impact on all of our stakeholders, our clubs, centres, members, partners, volunteers and staff. Recovery will not be straightforward, but with your continued support, we look forward to tackling the challenges that we will face in the years ahead. Thank you. That concludes my report. I don't believe any questions on the accounts were submitted in advance by members, but as Dave mentioned, all attendees now are encouraged to ask questions live via the chat function or indeed by emailing our agm@rya address. So please do ask if you have any questions and we'll do our best to respond. I'll just give it a couple of moments in case anyone does have questions now. Could I ask the moderators, please, whether any questions on the accounts have been received?
Thank you, Sarah. At this point, we have no questions specifically on the accounts, either in the live chat or indeed on the email account.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll have more opportunity to answer questions on all subjects later, but if there are no more questions on the accounts, I believe we can move on. I believe, Chris, sufficient votes in favour have been cast in advance for the accounts to be formally approved?
Correct. 2,886 votes have been received in favour of this motion, with 24 against and 216 abstentions. The accounts for 2019-2020 are therefore formally approved by a majority of 99.2%. Moving on to item 3 on our agenda, the election of the RYA President for the coming year. There is only one candidate, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal. Her Royal Highness has graciously expressed her willingness to continue to serve in office. 2,980 votes were received in favour of Her Royal Highness's reappointment as President, with 71 against and 75 abstentions, so I'm delighted to report this motion carried with acclaim. Item 4 is to appoint the auditor for the coming year and to delegate to the board the authority to fix their remuneration. Once again, this ordinary resolution has been passed. 2,905 votes were received in favour, with 58 against and 163 abstentions. I can therefore confirm that Hayes McIntyre LLP are reappointed for the year 2020-2021, with the remuneration to be decided by the board. I will now ask Dave Strain, in his capacity as the Company Secretary, to introduce the 5th item on our agenda today concerning special resolutions. Dave.
Yes, the first part concerns a change to the Articles of Association. Members have been sent details of this with the proposed versions and a summary table of the main changes, which can be categorised as follows. We have inserted definitions for a number of new terms, mainly dealing with hybrid and remote meetings, as well as updating others, for example, to make them gender neutral. We have increased the level of detail around board committees and rewritten a number of articles to make them clearer. We have recognised that our affiliate members have different types of legal status, such as associations or companies, and in light of the current pandemic, made it clearer how we deal with remote attendance, hybrid meetings, and the postponement or suspension of our AGM. We received expert legal advice on these changes, which the board feels are necessary for the good of your association. Are there any questions from the floor, Loretta?
Not at this stage, no, Dave.
Thank you. I've received advance comments both in favour and against these changes. One member has written in to say that these new articles are a vast improvement on the previous version, whilst another felt that slow progress that has been made towards the English Regions Forum only emphasises that the current requirement for member engagement is inadequate. Regarding the latter point, I hope that the presentation that Sarah will make shortly will go some way to addressing this concern. I can confirm that 2,772 votes have been received in favour of this motion, with 58 against and 296 abstentions, a margin of 98%. The motion is therefore passed, and I will be filing an updated copy of the RYA articles with Companies House in the coming weeks. The second related piece of special business is to approve proposed changes to the board regulations. Although elements of the board regulations can ordinarily be amended by resolution of the board, there are specific changes that relate to non-executive director term lengths and the composition of the nominations committee, which are protected within the Articles of Association, and as such they require the approval of our members. Again, a summary of the changes was circulated to members, and thank you, Tom. I see that he's already put up the summary table highlighting these changes. The key change here is to remove the one-year stand-down period between non-executive director terms. The board feel this is detrimental to board performance, and we also wish to remove the formal requirement for the nominations committee to contain a nominated director, although it should be noted that this change does not preclude a nominated director being asked to sit on the nominations committee. Again, we have had advanced questions on this point, but the board feels that in practice, irrespective of their route to the board, there has been no distinction between nominated and independent directors acting on NomCom, and that all directors are obliged to act not only in the best interest of members and affiliates, but also the wider company. The proposed change is not designed to reduce the influence of members over the association, but it will make the constitution of NomCom more straightforward. I can confirm that 2,750 votes have been received in favour of this motion, with 63 against and 313 abstentions. The motion is therefore passed, and the new board regulations will be uploaded to the website and will come into force with immediate effect. Are there any more questions, Loretta?
No, your moderating team have checked both the live chat and the email. There are no questions at this stage.
Thank you, in which case I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Dave. You as members have not been asked to vote on a new non-executive director position this year, as no nominated directors reach the end of their terms. However, John Scott, who is an independent director, will be retiring. John has provided exceptional service to the RYA as a director since 2014, and I would like to thank him most sincerely for his wise counsel and unstinting support over this time. The board may choose to appoint an independent director during this year in accordance with its regulations. I would also like to mention and thank the retiring Home Country, Regional and Policy Committee chairs for their service. Ewan McPherson, Chair of RYA Scotland, and Jackie Patton, Chair of RYA Northern Ireland. Regional Chairs Johnny Johnston of the South Region, Jeff Meggett of the North West, and Ian Smith from the North East. And 3 key Policy Committee chairs, Charles Glover of the Participation and Membership Committee, Carla Stanley, Chair of the Racing Committee, and Matt Wright of the Training Committee. These are all key volunteer positions in the RYA governance structure, and I would like to thank each of them for their service. Meanwhile, all our clubs and centres are equally dependent on volunteers, and I will now hand over to Sarah to report on this year's volunteer awards.
Thank you, Chris. So this year a total of 44 awards are being made after what was once again a very difficult set of decisions for the awards panel. These comprise 36 community awards, 2 of which are joint, the Francis Elkin Award for services to RYA sailability, the inaugural Honor Preston Award for services to inclusivity in boating, and 6 RYA regional and national awards. Of course, the RYA Volunteer Awards lunch and ceremony were originally scheduled to be taking place in central London today, but for reasons everyone will appreciate, we had to take the difficult decision to cancel the ceremony, and the awards are being presented by club and RYA representatives in individual ceremonies all over the country. 10 presentations have already occurred, and the regional volunteer teams have been incredibly positive in lending their support to make sure that those are special occasions. The remaining 34 awards presentations will hopefully be possible before Christmas. The names of all the recipients will be published in the next RYA magazine, but you can also see the recipients together in photographic form on the screen now. Meanwhile, a video call is being arranged for all 44 recipients, during which they will have the opportunity to view a direct personal address recorded by our President, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, and to celebrate together. The date is yet to be agreed, but it will take place towards the end of this year and will be hosted by senior RYA volunteers and staff. And Chris, I know you'll be very pleased to attend.
Indeed I will, Sarah, and as a panel member, I can only agree with how tough the selection was for these awards. That almost concludes the business for today, but before we move on to the final item on the agenda, any other business, we would like to show you a short video summing up the RYA's year, and then Sarah will give a brief presentation reporting on our member and other stakeholder engagement strategy. This is a formal requirement of our articles and something we take extremely seriously. We'll then open up the floor for questions, which can be submitted via the chat option on your screen. Tom, could we look at the video, please?
Thanks. So some great scenes there capturing the sheer variety of RYA activity in the year. Although I must admit it felt strange seeing those crowded dinghy show halls and the hugs on the podium in those pre-COVID days. As Chris said, I'd now like very briefly to present our member and other stakeholder engagement strategy to you before we move on to any other business. So this is not a new strategy or a piece of corporate PR. As a members organisation, we fundamentally rely on engaging individual and affiliate members, industry partners, our volunteers and staff, and we've done so very successfully for many years. However, we always strive to do better, and when the Sports Governance Code provided a catalyst, the RYA Council and Board determined to aim for a gold standard in engagement. A simple strategic framework was developed under the acronym MOSES, Member and Other Stakeholder Engagement Strategy. The need for an engagement strategy is enshrined in our Articles of Association, and today's presentation will take you through how our MOSES model is guiding improvements in how we really listen to and engage with our members. The member or stakeholder themselves sits at the centre of the model. Our objective is to recognise and engage all classes of stakeholder in a tailored, relevant manner in order to add value to them and the RYA. We don't just engage because we have to, it's about better understanding our members and stakeholders through two-way engagement to ensure your views, concerns and aspirations help influence and shape RYA policy. The cyclical shape of the model is deliberate. At each stage we look to identify gaps and opportunities for improvement. First, we aim to know and understand, develop a deep knowledge of each stakeholder group and our individual members, and make better use of our data to provide personal interactions based on smart customer insight. For this, we need to really listen to members and stakeholders, allowing them to communicate in whatever ways best suit them, from telephone to Twitter, email to pen and paper. Using the understanding we glean, we then engage members via a tailored selection of content curated to be relevant to them. And finally, to connect them with like-minded others, not always with the RYA as a mediator. Whether at a national saleability or race officials conference or at a local club workshop, people often get most out of the casual encounters with others and the learning this gives. For NOMI, the key question is around how the information we hold is kept up to date. And the best method is that you as members are able yourselves and motivated to keep your own information updated. In order to develop a deeper knowledge of our stakeholders so that we can deliver an experience that is truly valued and relevant, we need to fill the gaps in our membership records and capture more of your voting preferences. We've already made some good progress in this area, but tracking email engagement and visitor journeys through our new website will really help us on the next part of our MOSES journey. And there are also some groups of potential new members who we realise that we don't know well enough yet, especially those from diverse ethnic backgrounds. In listening, the next step of the model is all about the requirement for two-way dialogue. How are your suggestions, concerns, even complaints, for example, received and followed up on? Listening to our members and stakeholders and them knowing that this is the case is central to it being a two-way engagement strategy. We're at a real crossroads here, and we know that many of you still prefer to communicate with us using letters or emails, whilst others almost exclusively reach out to us on social media. It's our goal to be using all possible channels to listen to you, our members, and allow you to tell us what you think at the time and in the way that's most convenient to you. We've always carried out surveys and polls with personal and affiliate members to gauge views, and the work on our sustainability strategy was a great example of this, where we engaged with well over 200 people at 25 different sessions to feed into the strategy. So can stakeholders really communicate with us when, where and how they want to? What changes do we need to make? You can always reach us via our social media, by dropping us a line to the dedicated Ask at RYA email account, or pick up the phone if you have any thoughts on how we can listen to you more effectively. In Engage Me, this is where actually the most interesting bit starts, using what we know from understanding and listening to our members to provide curated, relevant, and above all, engaging content. Balance is also of fundamental importance here. That means ensuring our content fully represents our broad range of boating activities, of geographies, and our diverse membership. We have to keep asking the question, does our content work for all types of people and all types of boats? We've already made some improvements to the RYA magazine based on what you, our members, have told us, and we've also introduced an In Your Area section to our newsletters to deliver content which is local and relevant to the reader. But the coming year will see huge steps in the personalisation of our communications as we launch our new RYA digital platform. Finally, connecting members and stakeholders with one another is a fundamentally important element of our strategy. Sometimes the RYA's role is as a coordinator and facilitator rather than a central key player. Whether physically or virtually, at a conference or via a webinar, we know that members derive great value from interacting with other like-minded people to learn, discuss ideas and share experiences. Part of delivering our gold standard strategy will be to determine the best mix of physical events and virtual connections. So whether it's attending a virtual race officials or cruising conference, taking part in a forum, a steering group or a poll, or joining the hugely popular club development webinars, we'll aim to deliver a great mix of connection opportunities for all our members. Measuring the effectiveness of the RYA stakeholder engagement strategy is also a requirement of our articles, and each priority goal has a clear, objective measure of impact, such as reach or relevance, and almost all of these are already being measured. What you see on the screen is just a snapshot of some of the indicators of success that we're measuring, but examples include looking at duplicate or incomplete records on our database, monitoring website visits and unique logins, our PR reach, newsletter open rates, video views, training candidate response rates, club logins, and many, many more areas. These measures will ensure that we're able to demonstrate the impact that our member and stakeholder engagement strategy is having. I'd like to close by thanking all of you, our members and stakeholders, for contributing to the Moses journey so far, and would like to encourage you all to embrace the opportunities that the digital transformation will afford us as we aspire to further improve member and stakeholder engagement. So that, in essence, is the engagement strategy. A journey that will never be finished, but one where we hope to see continued improvement over the coming year and will therefore see increasing relevance to you as members. I'd be delighted to take any questions that you have on this as part of the Q&A session now. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. We now come to any other business. I'm told we've received a number of questions in advance of the AGM, understandably mostly concerned with Brexit and other cruising and government affairs related matters, from red diesel to return goods relief. These have been put to our experts for detailed responses which have been sent directly. Loretta, as moderator, could you please let us know if there have been questions from the floor?
Of course, thank you. We have had some questions from the floor, and our first one to kickstart our Q&A would be, how will the RYA be supporting clubs and class associations with their recovery in the coming months and years?
Sarah, can I pass that to you?
Of course, the most fundamental question, because obviously without that support, it will be extremely difficult to recover. We'll continue to offer all of the range of support and resources that we've been trying to do throughout lockdown, be that for encouraging membership in clubs, participation. We've got some really engaging new video resources to support club level coaching and racing. And we'll continue to give the detailed advice and guidance on legal matters, particularly those to help clubs try and access financial help available, whether from government sources, local sources, or even things like rates, rebates. So fundamentally, our main thrust of our strategy for the next year will be exactly that, offering that support to clubs and ensuring that they can share the best practice and learning that clubs have had across the others. We don't pretend to have all the answers here in RYA House, and a lot of it will come from the network.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question.
So our next question surrounds the welcome significant budget of 1 million assigned to digital. Now even more is needed. Please can you outline the scope of the specific areas covered by this very welcomed initiative and tender processes?
I think that's probably a question for you, Dave.
I'm sure Sarah will also have something to say on that. Essentially, the brunt of that initial investment is largely in the technology that will support our new website going forward. The technology that the website is currently hosted on is coming to the end of its natural life, and will therefore be using a new platform, Sitecore, going forward, and that will link into a number of new elements, including our shop and our email ability and how we track and understand the needs and wants of our members much better in the future. So largely at the moment that investment is in the infrastructure and the design elements of that new website.
So would you like to add to that? Perhaps I could just add that this is absolutely vital for our future, as the questioner has rightly pointed out.
Certainly, and I think that's a very good answer, Dave. Fundamentally, in common with lots of organisations, our current platforms were a little bit of a Heath Robinson affair. They didn't always talk smoothly to one another. And as I outlined in the member and other stakeholder engagement strategy, what we really want is for the website to get substantially smarter about learning how to deliver content quickly and easily that members want from it. This has got to be a user-based platform that's there for our users rather than for us to try and present what we want to them. So the critical elements of it will be a very new experience, bringing together kind of like-minded areas of content. So the search function will be substantially easier, the ability to find quickly what you want and need, and also for members to be able to feed back to us. But the questioner is right around this. It is just the start of the journey. It's a very powerful platform, and when it goes live at the beginning of next year, the first few months will all be about learning from it what the kind of most common routes are through it. Interestingly, I believe the RNLI, one of our closest partners, uses the same platform, so we've been lucky enough to be able to learn from them a little bit what the kind of powerful connections it can make are. So watch this space.
Thank you. So, Loretta.
Thank you. The digital transformation is certainly proving to be a popular and hot topic with our viewers today. So one of the questions we've had was around, will there be any new online tools for instructors as part of the transformation?
I certainly hope so. One of the things we've seen through our response to the pandemic is that some of the changes we've made in training out of necessity have started to show that they could have potential going forward to be more of a permanent addition. So whether that's online instructor revalidations, whether that's kind of some of the suite of training videos that we've been able to produce that have started to reach a much broader audience, and also the increase in the numbers of candidates looking to take e-learning courses. We obviously already have a platform with a number of different courses on it, but potentially that may be set to increase. So I think for me the future looks like much more of a blended offer, where we obviously won't be abandoning in any way, shape or form our commitment to practical on the water training, but there are so many elements of kind of pre-work and theory that potentially can be developed really effectively online, and we'll be looking to expand those wherever we can.
Slight change of tack now for our next question. What is the RYA's strategy on the regulation and control of boating and the wider boating stakeholder groups?
That's a very big question and an important one. Sarah.
It is. So I think back in 1960-something, 1963 I believe, this phrase, education not legislation, was coined, and it's been a fairly fundamental RYA tenet ever since. And the premise there is that when people understand the reasons behind something, they're far more likely to take it to heart and comply with it. And we find, for example, with training, which is, as people listening will know, not mandatory for recreational boating in the UK, that take up of that training and adoption of safe practices tends to be higher than when said training is mandated, where sometimes you can end up with a lowest common denominator effect, where people will take the basic level training to get the required legal minimum and then not take it any further, whereas RYA training tends to be built on self-reliance and self-knowledge, self-education. It's all about people actually wanting to learn. So I think that principle of fully understanding the situation and then asking and encouraging and guiding people to behave appropriately applies throughout, whether it's RYA training, it's our approach to safety, our approach to things like compulsory skipper licensing or vessel registration. On the whole, we feel that compliance and genuine safety is best served by education first and a legislative response only if entirely necessary.
Thank you.
Loretta.
So I would have been surprised if there wasn't a COVID question in here. So here's a COVID question. Has the RYA board dedicated enough resource to supporting sailing during the pandemic?
There is never enough. We've done everything we could. We've been fantastic efforts by the staff, really starting with the enormous effort to make sure that boating was within the first phase of sports being allowed in the coming out of lockdown. We've seen tremendous activity this year supported by the staff, supported by clubs. And if we look at the board has worked very closely with the executive throughout that process, and I hope we provided the necessary support. So I think there's never enough resource, but with all the resources that we've got, we've done the very best we could.
Thank you. And on the same topic, how has the RYA managed the very challenging situation of having geographical variations on lockdown restrictions, not just in the English regions, but in our differing home countries as well?
That's a great question, and it's been a great challenge, particularly as the guidance has been not always clear, not always consistent, and not always timely. And within that very difficult environment, our team have done their best to try and bring clarity wherever they could. Sarah.
Yes. So here's the thing, there have been variations geographically, as the person asking the question has highlighted, not only between the different home nations of the United Kingdom, but sort of at micro geographic areas within that. South and North Wales, for example, sometimes on different regulations, variations across England as well. And as Chris mentioned, there's been quite a lot of difference between the various key government departments with which we interact. Including the Department for Transport and DEFRA, as well as DCMS. So essentially our approach, I guess in line with the previous comments about education, not legislation, has always been to try and provide a principles-based approach and enough kind of guidance and detail and interpretation to enable clubs and training centres and members to essentially make up their own mind as to how, where, what they're able to do within the circumstances that they're operating under. There is such a wide variety of what we're offering that it's almost impossible to ever try and create sort of guidance on the guidance that would enable every single member and stakeholder to make their own decision. But clearly the principle underlying it was to try and keep members, candidates, the general public safe, to comply with the regulations that government were making insofar as possible, and to do so in as consistent a way as we could. So what we ended up doing was basically providing a lot of interpretation and guidance and trying to offer that on a local basis. The regional development team and colleagues in the home countries led a lot of individual workshops, club development forums to really tease out the distinctions there between what was allowed, what wasn't allowed, and particularly not just geographically, but for different age groups and for different types of boating as well. So it has been a labyrinth. I can't pretend that it's been plain sailing all the way through, but hopefully, as Chris says, wherever possible, we've managed to get a straightforward guidance and some practical help where we can.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor?
No questions from the floor. However, we do have one final question here on the hot topic of offshore wind farms. So I understand the government has announced plans to quadruple the number of offshore wind farms. This will have a significant impact for the marine sector, fishing and sailing. we may find ourselves navigating large blocks of what are essentially industrial complexes in some of our favourite sailing areas. What is the RYA's position on that?
It's a big subject for discussion. Sarah, would you like to address it?
Thank you, Chair. This is an issue that's been ongoing for many, many years now, and essentially it's one that's all about balance. Obviously, all of us who enjoy boating want to do our best to protect the environment that we do it in, but on the other hand, as the RYA, we're very concerned to protect navigational freedoms and rights that mean that we can boat wherever we like. So some of the key issues for us, and obviously these are all to do with recreational boating, as opposed to any energy efficiency or questions of aesthetics, particularly ensuring that the wind farms don't end up as exclusion zones, thereby condensing maybe recreational traffic into shipping routes, and also that wind farm location is as thoughtfully planned as possible. And what we then do is use knowledge of cruising routes. We have quite a comprehensive cruising atlas which shows regular boating routes around our waters to make sure that planners take boating activity into consideration as far as possible, and I believe so far we've been very successful in that. Although that said, I believe some clubs have ended up using the wind farms as essentially pre-laid racing marks. We've also been concerned with very practical applications such as the air draft, the water draft, and of course essential lighting to make sure that safety of the wind farms is maintained at all times. They tend to be extremely large structures, very widely spaced apart, and navigation between them is possible, assuming that those kind of key components are fulfilled. So, as I said, we don't comment on their energy generation efficiency, nor on their aesthetics, but as far as we can, we're making sure that recreational boating and sustainable power can live comfortably side by side to protect the environment.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think there's one more question, Loretta.
One last question from one of our members who has joined us from the Caribbean. Will we be having a virtual lunch after the AGM?
What a lovely idea, but I don't think it's planned, unfortunately. But thank you for the question.
From the floor.
I think that concludes the AGM for today. Thank you for all those extremely good questions. Don't hesitate to keep on asking us questions. It's all part of the member and other stakeholder engagement strategy that Sarah's outlined. And thank you everyone who's attended this meeting, and thank you for voting in advance. I sincerely hope that next year we'll meet again in person, even if, as a result of this experience, we decide to continue some of the RYA business by virtual means. We found there have been some efficiencies. But until then, please stay safe, please stay well, and enjoy a final video marking this 50th anniversary of RYA training. Thank you and goodbye from us all.
RYA training's a pretty amazing thing. Obviously been around for 50 years as of this year, something we're very excited about. And the thing that I think we're most proud of is the fact that it is the biggest, best and most reputable training scheme of its type anywhere in the world.
I think RYA training has had a massive effect on the competence of people boating in the UK and the enjoyment they have for the sport, and a massive influence of safety. And we've seen an enormous interest worldwide in RYA training, and a huge number of people are taking advantage of it and are proud to have the certificate.
People are expecting to come on a course, they're expecting to learn from someone who's knowledgeable, who's credible, who understands how to deal with people and is able to put a subject across really well. And so the focus on instructor training has changed that, in that it's much more customer focused than it ever was.
RYA training gives so much more, I think, than people understand it to. There's so much opportunity within RYA training, it's incredible, whether you just want to take the courses as a hobby or whether you're looking at it to make something into much bigger, whether it's super yachts, whether it's teaching people to sail, whether it's going on to sail big boats or to work with events.
The UK is one of the safest maritime nations in the world, if not the safest, and it's all because people have got a drive to actually improve and get knowledge without being forced to get a licence. The fact that there's a huge scheme that goes from knowing nothing to knowing a great deal of crossing oceans on yachts, and you can dip in and out at any point, makes it really accessible and usable.
So the RYA training courses are backed up with a massive amount of expertise. We've got a great publications department who are constantly updating the tools that we use for our job, so the training resources, the books, and we're forever moving things forwards. And it's only being such a huge training force that we're able to do that. We can tap into our training centres, our instructors, the people who train the instructors, and the expertise from within the RYA itself. It really is a world-class training establishment. There's nothing else that rivals it.
I've always found all of the instructors I've had have been tremendously enthusiastic about not just the sport, but about the subject matter that they're passing on.
So if you've taken an RYA course at some point, you've instructed RYA courses, or you've worked with RYA training, I just want to say thank you very much for what you've done, for your contribution to the last 50 years of RYA training and for making it what it is today.